Hello everyone, and welcome to Transmission 4 of the Liberate Yourself podcast, where we are remembering our personal sovereignty in these transitional times. In this episode, I have a lively chat with astrologer Deborah Norton, who is based in Portland, Oregon. Deb is both informative and fun with her approach to the science of astrology. And we talk about how you can discover your superpowers through your natal chart, the mythology and importance of the dwarf planet Eris, and how the Uranus and Taurus transit can possibly reshape the planet as we know it. This podcast is supported by contributions made through Patreon. Patrons of the Liberate Yourself podcast receive access to a digital esoteric library of practical resources for your journey, as well as monthly astro and tarot readings from me. To find out more and join the community, go to patreon.com/liberateyourself. And now, enjoy this fun astro chat with Deborah. Hey Deb, how's it going?
Hi Trista.
Thanks for joining me today. So Deb and I actually met at the NORWAC conference, the Northwest Astrological Conference, when we realized we are both astrologers and also both lavender hair twins, which is fun.
Very important.
Right? But, and we've talked a little bit since then. I really, really appreciate her approach to astrology. Part of that is what's called evolutionary astrology, which is more of like approaching astrology as the soul's evolution through time and through this lifetime, sort of like a roadmap that's given to how your soul wants to evolve in this life, which I find really helpful. But yeah, Deb, can you just explain a little bit about your background and sort of how you approach astrology and why you love it so much?
Sure. So I became interested in astrology the first time I read a horoscope. When I was a kid, I thought it was fascinating. And I think that there's a natural need in people to sort of understand themselves from a young age, like that we come in without knowing anything. We're just kind of out here helpless, crying, naked, wet. We don't have a clue. We have no idea what's going on. And so from an early age, I was very, very interested in that puzzle, and I wanted to figure it out. And so astrology was just one of those extra things that I didn't really know what it was. And I went through several religions and a couple cults and trying to figure out like what is going on.
Yeah.
What's going on? Why are we here?
Why am I here?
Yeah. I'm still there, but I'm still working on it. So after I was fatigued from all of the religion, I started my way towards paganism. That was one I hadn't tried yet.
Yeah.
And so in this group, I met a wonderful, amazing master astrologer. His name was Eddie Gutierrez, or is Eddie Gutierrez. He has passed on. And I always give him credit because he was the person who really planted all the seeds and sat with me in my living room for a couple years in regular, tutoring sessions and taught me everything he knew. And so I really hold that sacred, and the way that he approached astrology is very much the way I do. And so I always want to give him credit for that, because I approach it from a very real sort of skeptic, position of let's see if this works. Let's perform all these experiments, meaning readings, and see how it works for people. And so I started giving readings for free, at parties, because I'm a little bit socially awkward. And so I found that if there was a lull in the conversation, and being a Cancer, I'm always trying to meet the needs, Yeah. And so I was like, oh, people are uncomfortable. Oh, I better say something. And so I said, hey, I can read astrology if anybody wants a reading. And so that thus began my, my experience doing readings. For the next 10 years, I did them that way.
Wow.
And then I was at a crossroads. I moved to Portland. I was entering my midlife transits. So I was in my late 30s, and I was really feeling lost. And I found the Portland School of Astrology, and it had just opened that year. So it really did feel like it appeared.
It lined up, yeah.
So I was like, okay, so I became, I got involved and graduated with the first cohort, and then I did the second year, and it was a lot. It really sort of brought everything out for me, and in a way that I didn't have confidence before I took those, courses, because I was thinking, who am I to charge money for this thing that I don't even know is real? Mm-hmm. And that is a sort of awkward place to be, especially with your integrity. And so I finally felt like legitimate, that I could, and encouraged by the teachers and the other students. I was very encouraged. So I started doing readings professionally, and that was about 3 years ago.
Nice.
And my approach is, and what I tell all my clients is, we have no idea how this works, but my theory is that we are souls evolving towards something. We don't know what that is. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think of it as evolving up so much as just evolving sideways in a way. I'm not into hierarchies, so I don't like to say that one soul is more advanced than another. You just are where you are. And, there's no, more, old soul, young soul. I don't get into that, because I think we're all the same. We all came from the same stuff. So we're all the same age, really.
Yeah.
And so I think that we are on this path, on this journey, and Earth is a stop on that journey.
Totally.
And perhaps many stops, but I feel like there's probably other planets and other life forms that we have been. And this particular one here, I think, is kind of like graduate level, because we don't get to know we don't get to know anything, we don't really know.
And we're dropped into this like super dense energy that we have to work through that is painful. It's so painful to,
especially if you're a seeker and you feel like there's something more. It is,
and you're coming from somewhere. That this isn't the first go round. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, we come in with things. I was afraid of water. I would not. My parents had to really pretty much torture me to get me to even attempt to swim. They would throw me in, and I would, I remember taking swimming lessons, and there was this big gutter around the inside of the pool. It was like an Olympic-sized pool, and I would get into the gutter and hide in the gutter. Like, this is crazy. All the
and
other
that's
kids
strange for a
splashing
Cancer
around,
sun
having
too.
fun, and I'm like terrified. So anyway, we definitely come in with stuff, so it had to come from somewhere. And so I call the natal chart a map, or a blueprint. I've even called it a cheat sheet. Because I really feel like it's the only thing that we have. We know when we were born into this universe, taking our first breath of life, in that moment is a constant. It's a fixed point in time and space that we landed here. And so I feel like that is really the only thing we have to go on. And then you put that, in the lens of astrology, and then you sort of start thinking, okay, these are the energies that are out here surrounding us on this, floating orb.
An archetypal language that is ancient and
it's 4,000 years old. So like, this is the first thing anybody ever figured out.
Yeah.
They looked up and they saw
at the sky.
Yeah, they saw stars and they figured it
Certain
out.
Certain things were happening on the Earth.
They started to measure behaviors against different times of the year, and all of that, created astrology as we know it today. And so I do think of it as something we left for ourselves. Our higher self left it for us to say, here's something. I know you're going in there with nothing, but here is something.
Yeah.
And I do think, as you said, that this is a very dense planet. Like there's not, very little comes in and out through all of the layers, of energy that surround us. And so basically, I think that I don't think it's going to tell you who you're going to be, what you're going to do, but it definitely tells you, what you're made of and what those energies running through you are, and
what you have to work with. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Yeah. What you have to work with. And so I take the highest honor to assist people on that journey of self-discovery. And, I tell my clients, I speak a language. It's astrology. Here's symbols. I show them the chart. There's all kinds of layers here. It's all about patterns. Right. And so I just sit there with them, and we start to pull apart the patterns and try to figure them out and place them in context in their own life. Like, I always go back to the Saturn return. I look at my ephemeris. I say that, what were you doing exactly in this period of time? And then we start to unravel it like a detective, and it's fun. And
it's
people
really
just
fun.
light up, because I don't necessarily think that an astrologer should just be talking at you and saying, this is what you are. Like, nobody can tell you what you are, but I can help, I can give you keywords, and I can, explain energies that conflict with each other, and when there's squares, and, and how things work well together when there's a trine, and it works, and they start to understand it. And that's what I really want, because ultimately I'd rather teach people to read their own charts than to read their chart for them.
Absolutely. And it's really, on the client side too, it's really validating. I don't think I've felt more validated and confident than hearing about the energies that, even if they're very severe or serious, like just hearing that is a very real energy that's at work within me and moving through me makes so much sense. And to any client, it just makes so much sense, the validation of it and why you are a certain way. And then you can kind of work with it instead of trying to shun it or work against it or try to change it. Like, you have to, from a client perspective, it's very comforting to know that you don't have to change it. You just kind of work it into the most benevolent expression of that energy.
Absolutely.
Powerful expression.
I mean, to watch people make those connections with themselves, that is the biggest rush for me as an astrologer, because typically what we find, and I used to think it was only older folks, but really it's anyone I've done readings for, they are doing it. They're doing it pretty well for the most part. And so to look at them and say, there's this part of you that's really brave and courageous and will stick their neck out, and perhaps to their own expense, and yet there's this other part of you that wants to stay home and stay comfortable and watch TV with your pets. And for people who are doing both of those things, they tend to think that it should be one or the other.
Right.
Like, they have to pick between these two very strong parts of themselves. And I get to tell them, no, you get to do both of them. And they both need to be expressed. So, your moon in Taurus needs to be home, needs to be comfortable, needs to be with the pets and under the blanket, and then that, Aries Mars needs to be out there bungee jumping or, at a protest, putting their neck out in front of, police and all of that. And you can be both of those things. And people get really excited about that, because they suddenly realize, oh, it's all of me. I'm not fighting against myself here. And most people are doing really well. And I'm basically here to say, carry on, you're doing well. But now you can move on consciously. Now you can start to see yourself consciously in all parts of yourself and move forward as a whole person. And a lot of us think that, especially in our society, that we're not good enough, or we're not where we should be by now. Like, capitalism is so part of how we think. That we don't realize,
ingrained with that lack mentality.
Yeah, for sure. And we're always comparing ourselves. And what I love to tell clients is, guess what? What if you're getting it right all along?
Yeah.
What if you haven't screwed up? What if you've been right all along?
What if you've just been learning really good lessons?
Yeah.
That
and it's
you wouldn't know otherwise.
Relief. I literally see this big weight lifted off them, and it's you're doing great. And and then if you work further with a client, then you can really start to dig into patterns. That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
Looking at patterns and understanding. I don't necessarily think we need to break all of our patterns. I think that patterns are there for a reason, but sometimes we're doing those patterns unconsciously.
Right. It's about pattern recognition, recognizing them and working in a flow with them instead of it being more discordant and not making any sense.
And in that sense of what's happening to me, other than this is what, this is how I'm evolving as an energy, basically.
Yeah, it gives you power.
Yeah, totally.
True inherent power.
My sort of secret sauce in the way that I approach astrology is that we all have superpowers. I believe that. I've seen it. I have them too. And once I started looking at certain aspects of myself, and they're usually the aspects that don't fit into society, that you look at and think that's something wrong with you. Like, I'm ultra sensitive, empathic, so I must be weak. you know, or I'm too sensitive, you know, all of that stuff is crap because my sensitivities are a superpower and I use them and I see how they change energy. They transform energy. And that's really what a superpower is. And we all have that, all of us. And I love to see people's faces when I say that's your superpower. And it's amazing. I love that part of it.
I know you definitely helped me a lot when you gave me a reading, like just lots of like confidence and validation. Because even if you're, you know, delineating your own chart and interpreting it on your own, it still helps to have an outside perspective or an objective perspective that can act as a mirror, you know, and show you what you can't see yourself subjectively. So
and I'm, you know, I definitely am not just a cheerleader. Like I'll definitely bring up issues that, you know, I'm not afraid to go totally into the dark. Like I'll go all the way down the Plutoville with anyone, and sometimes that happens immediately. I have a client that I've been working with for a couple of years, and I looked at her chart before I met her, and she's Scorpio rising with Moon and Neptune on the ascendant, like conjunct. And I knew right away. I was super excited. I was like, this is gonna be fun, you know. I have Jupiter in Scorpio, so that's for me. That's fun zone, you know. Totally. And so the minute we sat down, we were already talking about her husband who had died that year and all of what that brought into her world and to her children's world, like within 5 minutes. And so, you know, I go where they want to go, and I don't push into any area that people don't want to talk about or don't want to be specific about. But you know, it just depends on that person and what they need. But I like to go into the shadow. I'm sort of obsessed with shadow work. And that is a real tender place for people. And that's when I bring out my superpower, my super Cancer nurturing energy. And I also then can I can read undercurrents of emotion. Like I can read what is the undertow of an emotion. I can just feel it. And so then we start to unpack it and talk about it. And that is where the really good stuff is. And I've been surprised how many people are willing to go there and want to go there because they are feeling lonely there. You know?
Yes, we all are, I think. I think that's why astrology is so valuable, because it's not the same as going to therapy and having, you know, even if you have a Jungian therapist, there's something about the archetypal symbolic language of astrology that speaks to us on that deeper, like almost primordial level.
Absolutely.
Rather than
archetypes. I love working with archetypes. That is just an endless pursuit of study. I mean, it's just so rich with, and I find great value in that process.
Yeah. What I've found really fascinating about evolutionary astrology specifically is the lunar nodes. Is that something you'd like to speak about?
Yeah. So when we say evolutionary astrology, there's a lot going on behind that. So
please explain.
It's got a long history, back to the 70s, I want to say. It was the Jeffrey Wolf Green was, you know, the architect, so to speak, of evolutionary astrology, and wrote a lot of books, and he's a fascinating person and brilliant, like totally brilliant. And so he developed techniques on how to enter the chart through an evolutionary lens. And so he says that the soul is Pluto. And so his stuff is all very Pluto-centric. And that is actually representing your soul, which I find very fascinating, especially considering how far Pluto is away from us, and how that might be the point, you know, that could be one of the things about this place is that you're here and you're aware that you're in a physical form, and you think you have something else going on, like a soul, but it's really out of reach, you know, like Pluto's way out there. So I get a lot of value out of his work. But I don't use his techniques. But I look at astrology through that lens. The other astrologer that is famous for evolutionary is Stephen Forrest, and he has a different approach. He goes through the nodes, The North Node and the South Node. The South Node is where you've been. The North Node is where you're going. And so there are particular techniques around pulling out a past life through the nodal story. And so there's all kinds of specific techniques about how that works. And if there's planets squaring the nodes, it's considered a skipped step. That's something that you skipped over in a past life, and now you're here to sort of get that right. And so it gets very specific, when you have an evolutionary reading of this kind, the astrologer actually, suggests this is, you might have been a farmer, and, you were all alone, and, whatever, and they even bring out, like, according to a planet that might be conjunct the South Node, like, might be involved in how you died. I've tried that. I've had a reading like that, and it was phenomenal. I've tried it. I feel very uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable going there with clients. Like, it's up to them to suggest a past life. I'm not going to plant a seed, because those seeds go deep. I mean, people take that stuff and run with it. And so I would, if it comes to them when we're in the reading, then we'll look at it. But I don't necessarily suggest that. Instead, there's plenty in this life that's real that we can see.
Right. And the North Node is really where you're headed, and
the North
where
Node
you should feel into
is awesome, because I think about it all the time, because this is me saying what I believe about the North Node is that it's definitely the trajectory. It's sort of the path that you walk. If you walk on that path or get in that lane, you're going to get where you're going faster. You're going to evolve faster, so to speak. And so I think of it like the moving sidewalk at the airport. Like, you don't have to jump on it. You can just walk to the gate. But if you jump on that, you're going to go faster.
Yeah, and easier.
And sometimes people have energy, other planets around the North Node. So that helps, because you've got other energy that's already attuned. But if you have nothing, you just have this North Node and, like,
way out there. That's how mine is. Yeah, it's just like way out there.
Yeah, and you're
nothing
like,
else.
Sagittarius,
Yeah.
And so what I would tell someone is, do you have Sagittarius friends? Read about Sagittarius, because there's something there for you. And you get in their lane, and they will model that behavior for you. And so I would say the principles to sort of celebrate and ignite in your life is, learning about big things, traveling, philosophy, like all those Sag things. Like, don't let the dust settle under your feet. You always want to be growing and moving toward this higher minded place. And so that, and then that gives them something to sort of, attune to.
Yeah.
So for me, I have an Aquarius North Node, and I get into that radical revolutionary lane. And I have found that when I do that, when I jump into that lane, whoa, shit happens.
Yeah.
Like deep shit. Like, not
totally.
easy stuff. I mean, one of the biggest times I did that in 2012, and I was, out there protesting, I ended up getting fired. And so that brought me up against myself. And I will tell you, I had to evolve faster after that. I had to. And so I do tell people that if you're going to get in that North Node lane, be aware, be ready.
Yeah.
Stuff's going to start happening for you. And it's not going to all be easy, because certain things you're going to have to let go of, because they aren't serving your evolution, because that's what it's about. My job, I was stale. I wasn't moving forward. It wasn't helping me grow. I needed to be out of that job. And so you can jump in, then you can jump out.
Yep.
I've definitely jumped out of the lane, and then I go back to my Taurus Cancer, safety zone. Until I'm ready for another surge, and then I get back in the North Node. So that's kind of how I work with it, and how I have my clients work with it.
I think that's very true. That's what I found too, because that's why this podcast even exists, because I started getting in the Cancer lane, which is my North Node, which is like on the other side of my chart from all of my planets. It's just like this North Star. I'm like, Cancer, what? I don't understand. But yeah, it's and it's in my 10th house of business and career, like my cosmic office. And it's like the sign of the mother and nurturing. And so obviously I'm supposed to be, when I'm nurturing people through my business, or I'm nurturing my business, my work, all is well. And yeah, things are just, it feels like something, since I started doing that, something is just moving through me, and I have to just allow it, and it's pushing me out where I don't want to be, but you do. It's like rewarding in this whole other energetic level that you didn't know was possible. I feel.
Yeah, and it's not for the faint of heart either.
No.
I mean, getting in the I actually had a psychic counselor that I've been seeing, and she said that, this was right around that time when things started to move fast, and I started to put myself out there. And she said, "You're on the fast track." I keep hearing that word, fast track. And so that's what I think of as the North Node. It's the fast track, but now I realize I don't have to be in it every day. I can't. I could not survive that way. But I know that when I need a surge, I know exactly how to get it. And I've tested this. It works.
Yeah.
So I feel like, okay, I'm starting to get... So that's kind of how I look at... I use the evolutionary astrology mindset of approaching the chart as, a soul. And this is just a human suit that you're wearing with a name. And then we jump in and out of the soul in my readings. I will say, so, a certain in a certain energy, like Mars, where it's not, Mars stays dormant most of the time, and then suddenly Mars jumps in to your body almost and takes over. I kind of think of it as driving a car. When you're driving, and suddenly Mars is like pushing you out of, the driver's seat and just taking over. And that's what it feels like. Suddenly you get this rush of adrenaline, and your body starts to tingle, and then you're doing something without thinking about it. That's instinct, and that is Mars. That's when Mars takes over. And I feel like that's a very human experience. And so that's when we're, the personal planets, I feel, are very attached to our human expression.
Yes.
And then as we start to go out, we, especially towards, even Jupiter and Saturn, we start to get into soul territory. And then Chiron is that bridge, the bridge between, and that's all about the healing, the tending of our sore spots. Yeah. And then we get, and that gateway takes us, start working on healing, and you will get towards those outer planets. It is truly like a bridge.
It really is.
Yeah. But you have to be ready.
You're right. It is not for the faint of heart, for sure. So how would you say astrology helps you and your clients understand their own personal sovereignty, or how to understand and hold that and gain that? Is that something you'd like to?
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it's all about. Empowerment. That's my goal. We are all amazing and fascinating and powerful and strong and strange, and we all have these natural abilities and gifts and tendencies. And I got on board with this mentality probably during my Saturn return, when I got out of the last cult I was in, because that's what you don't have in a cult, right? You have no personal sovereignty.
Yes.
You are told exactly what to wear, how to be, everything.
What you
can eat, what you can't eat, what movies you can see, what movies you can't see. Like, everything is told to you. This is commanded to you.
And that's attractive on a certain level, which is why I'm sure you were into that, because you don't have to have the responsibility of cultivating that yourself. I'm guessing.
Prey.
I don't know.
No, I was easy prey. I was young. I was freaked out by life. I came out of the womb freaked out, and I've been
You're
freaked
sensitive,
out, and I'm still freaked out. Every day I'm freaked out. And so when you don't understand what's going on with you, or you don't understand that, I didn't know what an empath was. And so I walk into this meeting, and this cult meeting, and everybody's happy and connected and love. And I felt all that. And so I was practically levitating by the end of the meeting. And instead of realizing that I'm just empathing these other folks here, I'm feeling what they're feeling, I was like, no, I must be a part of this, and here's everything,
wow.
and I'm giving it over to you, and take over for me, you know. And so I don't have to make these decisions anymore. You get to tell me what's right and wrong. And it is sort of this way of being that for me, it lasted a Saturn cycle. It lasted from my Saturn square to my Saturn return, you know, from early 20s to late 20s. And then all of a sudden Saturn return comes, and I just woke up because the cult was starting to be public and preach and legislate against gay marriage. And suddenly it was like, fuck no.
Yeah.
No, I just hit this hard line. And from one day to the next, then that night I burned all of my stuff that had to do with it. I knew what would happen. I would lose my marriage. I knew that I would lose my marriage. I might even lose my kids if I didn't handle it just right. But when Saturn return comes, I don't know, for me, it's like I hear that voice of integrity and, you know, and alignment. And I'm just like, no, there's no question. It wasn't that hard, actually, because when I know, I know.
Exactly.
And
it was the same for me, for sure.
All those things did happen. I mean, I got divorced, and I got 50-50 custody of my kids. So at that point, I was going to have them only half of their lives. Yeah. And I had to choose. It was really hard as a Cancer to choose myself over that. So talk about personal sovereignty.
Totally.
Like, that's really a Saturn thing, you know, and you combine that with empowerment of Pluto, and, you know, then you're really like getting into serious water. And so, that's why I always review the Saturn return with clients, always. And if they're not that age, then we review whatever Saturn they've had up to that point, because that sense of authenticity is what I think that's the secret sauce of life. And there's so much written and said about Saturn, and it's all good. But what I keep it that's one of my techniques in astrology. I keep it really simple. And I don't want to throw too much at people, especially in the first reading. But Saturn, I call the universal chiropractor, and it's really about alignment. That's really all Saturn's about, is alignment.
I love that.
Yeah. And so just as if you would go to a chiropractor, depending on how long, you know, it's been, or what you do in your life to throw yourself out of whack, they put their hands on your neck, and they're about to like crank your neck, and it's scary, right?
It's scary and it's painful in the moment.
Yeah. And what do they tell you? What do they tell you right before they crack you? They say, all right, deep breath and relax and crack, right?
Yep.
Relax. So then you walk out of there, and suddenly everything feels like it's where it's supposed to be. That's exactly what a Saturn cycle is all about. You know, you're hobbling along in life. You've been having life. You've been experiencing. And so your alignment, your energy core is out of alignment with your higher self. And so Saturn comes in and says, all right, it's time to be adjusted. And if you resist it, like if you were to resist your chiropractor, what would that feel like, right? You might even get hurt. Yeah. So you can't resist it. You have to just know, this is my core. It's lighting up right now, you know, and you know that's a yes and that's a no. And just relax, take a breath, and do what you know is right. Yeah. And then watch how your life straightens out, and watch how your energy straightens out. And that's the secret of Saturn. And that's how I look at it. And we need those adjustments every 7 years. Yeah. So, and it's fun to watch people on that journey, and how they, you know, there's always a pattern, you know, the first Saturn return, there's always going to be some sort of pattern happening a lot of times especially in the midlife Saturn transit, the Saturn opposition. There's an echo effect. Wow.
Very cool. Man, it's a lot of good information.
I know, I talk a lot.
No, it's great. I'm glad. It makes it easier for me.
I have Mercury in Leo, so.
Oh, that's right. Like you're shining.
When I'm talking.
It's perfect for me. It's perfect. You did want to talk about the importance of Eris, right?
Yes.
And that's something I know almost nothing about, so I would love, tell me a story, Deb.
Yeah, I love this story. Yeah, Eris is very exciting. I first heard about Eris not as a planet, but as a well, archetype, and as this part of this religion called Discordianism. Which, if you're bored one day, Google that, because you will have a blast.
Is that a wiki rabbit hole we need to go down?
It's wild, weird stuff, and amazing. And Eris is the sort of the deity of Discordianism, and it all focuses around this concept of chaos and how chaos is a part of our reality, and we do everything in our power to put things in straight lines and rows, but there's this chaos effect, and it is part of our experience here, and that is part of what Eris brings in. And so Eris was discovered in 2005, so it's very recent, and it's amazing how this happened, because Eris is a badass bitch. Like, she is like, you don't mess around with this energy. Like, she will bring you down if you don't understand how to work with it. And so at the time when she was discovered, she was bigger. I'm sorry, don't mean to say she. It was bigger than Pluto. So that's what everybody, all the astronomers were like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Pluto is a planet, but here is Eris, it's bigger. What do we do about this? They didn't want to make Eris a planet. They could have just elevated Eris and said, here's the planet. Yeah. But they voted. They had this big conference, and they voted on. They had three options. One is to elevate Eris to a planet status, and two, to leave Pluto as a main planet and call Eris a dwarf planet, or to call both Pluto and Eris a dwarf planet. And that's what they chose. And that's when Pluto got demoted. And I love that, because Eris brought that fucker down. Oh.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Eris brought Pluto down.
Yeah.
Literally. And that's the energy. That is the energy. Like, energy that can bring Pluto to its knees.
Wow.
Like, that is intense. And we are now getting that energy, because now we've seen the planet, we've acknowledged the planet, we've named the planet, and now we are getting that frequency.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Yeah. Like when we discovered Uranus, basically, like that was wasn't that the Enlightenment and all the
Uranus, it was the scientific revolution.
Thank you, yeah.
Exactly. And Pluto was the atom bomb. So the things that happen reflect in that frequency, and so we are getting a new frequency right
chaos.
Now. Wow. As soon as that planet was named, we are now aware of it, and so now that we see it, we get that frequency, and we've seen a lot of wild stuff has happened since 2005. And we also look towards what's going on in the world when it was discovered. That's a huge part of how we understand outer planets as astrologers. And so the cool things that were happening, some cool, some horrible, that's kind of the nature of chaos, is fascinating to look at. So one thing that happened that's not cool or great was Hurricane Katrina. And what Hurricane Katrina did was brought out a shadow in our country that many people were not aware of, and the way that the President Bush responded or didn't respond to the folks who were suffering and lost everything in the hurricane. Boy, wow, did that expose something huge that we needed to know? Like, really huge. And the next thing that happened was, this is kind of minor, but it still kind of feeds the energy, is Prince Charles. I've got Prince Harry on the brain because of the wedding. Prince Charles was finally able to marry Camilla. So this is the other woman. So we're talking about the other with Eris. Right. And so the other woman, I mean, this is a big deal. The queen said it was okay for him to marry. And this goes against, everything. Tradition, in that, monarchy. But the coolest thing that happened was in Liberia. And Liberia is a country in Africa that was actually founded by returned enslaved people. So they returned to Africa and started a country there. And so it's, if you think of Liberia and liberation, you kind of see where that's the origins. It's the origins of this country. And so they were having, in 2005, a presidential race, and it came down to an athlete. So, a really, famous athlete who's, really popular, really, everybody knew his name. And this woman who had been working in government pretty much for her entire life, like working her way through government in different capacities. And the women in Liberia lost their minds. They were like, we've got to elect her, because at the time, I think it was like maybe 8 in 10 women had been raped in that country. Wow. So when you talk about chaos, this is a dangerous, dangerous place to be a woman, dangerous. And so the women thought, this is our shot. This is our chance to start to really shift things here. And so it was getting really close between them. And they started a campaign, and they started going out to the villages and watching each other's children so that they could go to the villages and talk about this candidate and promote this candidate. And so it came to a runoff between the two of them. And so women, a lot of the men in the country didn't realize that there was going to be another election. They thought it was over because they weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
The women were paying attention and found out, oh my gosh, we've got to stop these men from voting in the runoff. So they were literally stealing their husbands and their sons' voting cards. And they would sit in front of the bars, and they would say, here, I'll buy your voting card. You don't need it anymore. So here's money for you to go into the bar and buy beer.
Oh my God.
They were crafty. They were tricky. And
That's
they won.
So cool.
She won. And so that
is definitely some feminine, chaotic power, creative power.
It's so classic. Because the myth of Eris is, that they were having a big party on Mount Olympus. There was a big wedding. Everybody was going. And Eris was left off the guest list because Eris was another. She was other. And
she's an outlier.
Yeah, she was just other. Yeah, I mean, she might have had a somewhat cranky attitude, but still, she wasn't liked, and so she was left out. And so she goes to the wedding anyway, and she gets this beautiful giant golden apple that has inscribed on it, to the fairest, and then the word was Kalisti. And she throws the apple into the middle of the wedding, and all of the goddesses scramble to get it because they all feel like they're the prettiest. Yeah. And so it comes down to this competition, and they have to vote, and all the goddesses are parading themselves and saying, like a beauty contest. And so Zeus leaves it up to a human to decide who wins. And one of the things he was tempted with was all knowledge. One was, I think, the goddess of the hunt. So, as much as you want to get from hunting. And then the third one was the most beautiful woman in the world. And of course, what did he pick? Of course, he picked the most beautiful woman in the world. And that was Helen of Troy. And so the idea is that this whole event, this Eris moment, caused the Trojan War. So it really comes down to the other for me. There's a lot about Eris, but that's the biggie. And because now we're starting to see the other in a way that we haven't before.
We're starting to see that discord and what that chaos does. But I mean, in Hermetic tradition and alchemical tradition, the chaos is, the feminine, dark, creative principle.
Right.
I mean, that's essentially what a womb is, if you look at it in a literal point of view. So that's really fast. So in a way, I mean, this is just coming to me, I guess we are kind of returning to the divine feminine through chaos, chaos that we see around us.
Yeah, I really
and learn
feel
to work with.
Energy has to match energy in order for it to transform it.
Totally.
And so Eris has to come to be willing to play on the level of darkness as Pluto is. As the atom bomb. I mean, Pluto, Aries has to be meet that energy level in order to transform it into something more evolved that we can all evolve with, right? So Aries comes onto the scene. I mean, everything about Aries, the story of how it was discovered, the myth, like all of this just paints this luscious picture of this energy that is now a part of our collective. And so I started putting it on charts. And so I don't always talk about Aries, but if it makes a major point, there's a generation of people who were born, they are all in their early 40s, like around 40 years old right now. I've done a lot of readings for people that age. And Aries is just at a point in those charts to create a kite. Without Aries, it's the point of the kite. Without Aries, there is no kite.
Wow.
So the minute I put Aries on the chart, the aspect lines appeared. And suddenly there's a kite that was
There's a story that makes sense. I mean, if you explain what a kite kind of is. It's an aspect. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's an aspect that forms, essentially brings the energies of 4 planets together in order to kind of...
a kite. Yeah. When the aspect lines appear between the planets on a chart, it's no doubt, it's a kite. It looks exactly like a kite. And it's comprised of, let's see, trines and sextiles, and then but the biggie is the opposition in the middle,
right?
Because the opposition goes all the way through the middle of the kite. That's the rod in a kite, and so Aries forms that bottom point of the kite. And guess what the top point is? Pluto.
Right.
So these folks, I mean, wow, I could not believe how that chart changed suddenly when I threw Aries. So I now always have Aries on the chart. It's default, in my charts.
Yeah, that's exciting. I want to look mine up.
All this delicious stuff to work with. And boy, when I start talking about Aries, people get really intrigued and excited.
Yeah, I am, for sure.
It's an energy that we're still understanding. So I don't claim to know exactly everything and the way it's going to manifest in someone's life, but we can explore that together, and that's exciting.
Right. So what would you say, just to kind of wrap up the Eris talk, like, how do you explain to a client, like, the position of Eris and what that what sign Eris is in, and the position and what that sort of means to them on a psychological level, like the rest of the planets,
Well, for all of us, Eris is in Aries. Aries has a huge, wide elliptic.
I was going to say it's more than Pluto, or no, it would be a little bit less.
I think
orbit?
It's like 560 years or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's huge. And so for all of us living, we all have Eris in Aries.
So it comes down to the aspects it's making in your chart and what house it's in.
Eris will move into Taurus in the 2040s. Okay. So all of us, we're all working with that energy in Aries. Yeah. So I look at the house and I look at the aspects for sure, to sort of invite that conversation. I don't know exactly how it's manifesting. I think of myself as a pseudo-scientist,
Exactly. You're not there to tell people something. You're there to kind of co-create and figure it out together.
Yeah. And it's fun like that too.
It is.
People are we're like, let's unpack this, and let's keep seeing each other so that we can watch how that energy is working and moving in your life experience.
Because they're part of the investigation instead of, this hierarchical, like a psychologist would be like, I'm going to help you and you're my patient. And
I can't stand that. I cannot stand power over.
Definitely like a cosmic collaboration.
I'm here to abolish that. Like, that's my life's work.
Yeah.
Abolishing hierarchies. That's my North Node in Aquarius.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of times we'll look for the chaotic moments and how and one in particular way is, how do you respond to chaos? When you're in a chaotic moment, who do you become? Because just like Mars, when Mars takes over the wheel, right? That's who you become when you're in Mars energy. So Aries, that's the way to look at it. How do you respond to chaos? How do you respond to whether or not you're an other, or you're not an other, but you see the other? How do you respond? And how do you advocate for your own otherness as well? because advocating for your otherness is empowerment. And
Gotcha.
it is, like you said, autonomy, sovereignty,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because
Mm-hmm.
those are the ways that we become victimized by other folks, is when we are different, and still don't understand why human beings are not comfortable with things that are different, or people that are different. That's what it comes down to. And I think that we're seeing the marginalized communities powering up right now. It's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing and exciting.
It is.
And it's up to all of us as responsible, caring humans to see that, and to sit down.
Yeah.
When you're in a room and you are not the other, then let the other people speak.
Yeah.
Don't be the one raising your hand and taking over the conversation, you know? So whether you are male in a room with a lot of females, but not all, you know, predominantly male, you want to let the women have their moment, and just keep your mouth shut. Just sit in your chair and shut your mouth. That's
Yeah,
what I
just
love
for a minute.
sometimes. Just sit down. Shut up. We've heard enough from you, right? But just like that, you take your place of privilege. So mine, as a white woman, if I'm in a room with people of less privilege than me, then I take a back seat. And that's how we empower folks who have never had a voice to speak up. That's how we have to do it. We, as, you know, primarily the white folks who have colonized and taken everything away from others, that's all we do. It's for us to recognize that this is where we start to shut up and listen and get out of the way. Imagine, you know, what I think of is, what is the potential of that voice that we haven't been hearing, that we haven't allowed to been hearing yet? What is there? You know, it's going to advance our civilization if we
for the good of all, for the good of everyone.
Because that vantage point, standing in the shoes of someone who's been marginalized their whole life, perhaps in intersecting ways, you know, maybe you're a trans woman of color, you know, those are intersections of being trans and also being a woman and also being of color. Like all of those ways amplify the otherness. But boy, I want to hear what that person has to say about life.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, it's an exciting time to be alive. I'm really grateful for it all the time, regardless of the chaos. And it's just going to, you know, chaos again. I mean, just to kind of end on this, we can hit on Uranus and Taurus a little bit, because that is some chaos, baby.
Well, that's what's cool. I mean, we've been talking for years about the Pluto-Uranus squares. There were 7 squares, you know, starting in 2011, I think, until 2016, I think, maybe 15. And we were all excited about these squares, and all the astrologers were just in a buzz over it. But nobody realized that Eris and Uranus were conjunct. So,
you're right. Yeah.
So there was something else going on besides just Uranus and Pluto. So Uranus has moved on now, but Pluto is still holding at 23 Aries. So Pluto and Eris are still squaring, but Uranus has moved on into Taurus. And so what can we expect? Like, look at Hawaii right now.
Yeah, I mean, the literal interpretation is earthquakes and volcanoes, and literally the earth shaking. I kind of had this epiphany the other day, because you know, I listened to a lot of like channeled material about ascension and the new earth and everything, and in a way, because Uranus is going to be in Taurus for the next 7 years, and it could literally be translated as Uranus new, Taurus earth, like new earth, like literally. So I just I'm really excited about how it's going to shake up our value system, what we value, our monetary system, our financial system, all of these, what we thought were very static and concrete institutions that would never go away. Guess what? That's what Uranus does. He's going to demolish, I feel, is going to demolish and shake up and reform them. I've been calling it like the Great Reformation. I feel like that's what he's going to be doing.
Yeah, I think that what we'll see is beyond just the earth things, like Hawaii is, cracking open the earth right now, literally. I think that, cryptocurrencies is a way that we're starting to see the financial system being transformed or broken up, basically, and something new put in its place, which is what Uranus does, is bring something new to the table. But I'm also thinking that along with the scary stuff, that we're going to see advances in science like we've never seen before.
I know.
I feel like that Uranus and Taurus could actually save our planet.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really hoping for, is that spark of brilliance and genius that Uranus brings, that is going to be so practical because of Taurus. It's going to be so physical because of Taurus, literal, that we maybe the brilliant minds out there are going to save our planet and help us learn how to save our planet. That's what I hope. That's the best case scenario.
I love that.
The worst case scenario, because I love the shadow.
I know. You gotta have it all.
I also think about it as being like a ripening, getting us the Earth ready for 2020, when the proverbial shit hits the fan and Saturn catches up to Pluto. And I feel like this Uranus Taurus thing is playing a role there, and we don't know. We don't know
Absolutely.
It, it's I got my popcorn out because it's going to be exciting. And, I always say this in joke that it'll be, some sort of apocalypse, and I'm all excited. I am. I'm like really excited about it.
Because that means an end of the old that hasn't been working for most people. So of course we're excited.
The first day that I don't have hot water,
I know.
I'm gonna be like, oh my God.
If I have to use a compost toilet, I'm out.
I'm always the one that when I watch The Walking Dead, I'm like, I'm out in the first round.
Right.
I tell my husband, I'm like, throw me as bait, get me out. I'm done. I don't want anything to do with that world. I know. And so there's a little.
And that's the worst case scenario. Which
I don't see zombies, but I could definitely see the infrastructure breaking down. And so, in Portland, we already have huge holes in our streets that nobody cares about. Just things like that. We might see the electrical grid take some sort of hit, which is terrifying. Just, don't even start to think about that, because that is a really dark rabbit hole. But stuff like that we've become so dependent on. And
it's good to prepare our minds for any eventuality. Or anything that could possibly happen. It's just good I don't think it's best to entertain all of the worst case scenarios and live in fear. Absolutely not.
Right.
But it's good to just be aware that these transits are affecting us on a very literal physical level. And I'm talking about Saturn moving through Capricorn and Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020. That's definitely tearing down and rebuilding physical structure that we know, physical institutions. So
thank goodness Saturn's going to zoom right into Aquarius after that, because then we might actually bring that might be the really good stuff coming through. That's what I'm excited about for sure.
Oh my gosh, Deb, so this has been super fun and action packed. Thank you. So tell people where they can find you. We got to do this again because there's so much to talk about. But
I know, I could literally sit here for 8 hours, Krista.
I know. That's why I was like, you're going on the podcast. But if people are curious about getting a reading with you, how can they find out about you?
Yeah, so I have a website called DeborahNorton.com. That's Deborah, DeborahNorton.com. I just launched my new website. I'm really excited about it. There's ways to book right on the website. And I really, am excited about, this new wave of energy that's coming in and how that's even transformed my astrology business and everything going forward. So if you want to get a reading, then that's where you go.
Let's do it.
I'm not great at self-promotion.
None of us are, but
I get kind of nervous.
That was perfect. All right, Deborah. Well, take care down in Portland and hang on to your hat for the wild ride, as the rest of us are. And until next time.
Right on. Awesome.
See ya.
Krista.
Thank you.
That was a super fun and in-depth look at some of the astrological transits coming up and the potential for you to uncover your own superpowers to ride this wave into the unknown. To get your own reading from Deborah, go to deborahnorton.com and book a session with her right from the website. Thanks again for tuning into this transmission, and until next time, take care out there.